Well, good evening. It is 5:30, and we will call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of January the 18th, 2022 to order. Roll call. Notice that all members are present with the exception of Nate Treadaway. Minutes from the previous meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes of the previous meeting? Yes. Which would have been December the 21st, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve or the minutes.
I move we approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. At this time, we will open the, assume we will we don't need a code officer report at this time?
No, sir.
Okay. Open the public hearings. And for item number 1, which is a request for a rezone at 120 Vine Street from MH to PID, a planned industrial development from a mobile home park. Code officer report.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just as you explained, this is an application for a rezone to a PID from manufactured home park for a clean energy biofuels facility and a bulk oil and gas distribution facility. The applicants are here to speak to the request, and staff recommendation is approval with, I believe, an edit to the plan book that they may be presenting to you tonight. Other than that, recommendation is for approval from staff.
Okay. Is
Chairman.
someone present to speak for this request?
Chairman, before we get started, due to a direct relationship to the applicant, I'm going to recuse myself from voting and questioning.
So noted.
My name is Rick Huzak with Clean Energy Biofuels.
Wesley Sisk, Brown Oil Company.
I'm Hunter Blair with Clean Energy Biofuels.
Huck Holder from Clean Energy Biofuels.
Well, y'all, in general, what we've decided to do is when we acquired this property, it was too big for one of us. So we decided to acquire it together, and we have been doing business with Brown Oil for quite some time now, and we thought that this would be a very cohesive development that we could work on together. So as you'll see in this plat, we're going to divide it up after the rezone, where we'll be able to use Wesley's services and for our trucks. We really want to get our trucks off the road on Monroe Jersey Road and have them more on Highway 11 because they're running mostly to New Orleans and Savannah, and Highway 11 is obviously a good junction point to get there. But that really was the idea behind acquiring the property and then eventually breaking it up and deciding how we want to have the planned industrial development look going forward.
Yeah, and then for me speaking on Brown Oil's behalf, you know, we're obviously existing non-conforming in downtown, have long outgrown the space that we are in, and at the rate that we're growing, we're just looking to make a move, get out of town, to be able to redevelop our piece of property inside of the historic district into, you know, whatever we see fit for the future. But this is a good fit for all of us. It's a good fit for Vine Street. I think it's a good it's a good start to cleaning up Vine Street and turning it back more industrial like it used to be. Yeah, questions, concerns?
I would just ask that if y'all would go ahead and mention the modification to the uses.
Yeah, so I mean,
they'll be aware of it.
Me speaking on behalf of Brown Oil, I mean, ours is pretty cut and dry. as far as being a fuel oil distributor, finished lubricants distributor and trucking company. I think the only questions that might have come up are regarding, you know, how Down to Earth treats and processes their product, which they can answer that.
I would have one question for Brown Oil, though. Are you moving all of your facilities?
Everything.
From downtown out to this?
Everything,
Okay,
yes.
everything.
With the exception of the convenience store,
Oh, that's true.
which is, you know, is pretty well grounded. But yeah, everything, warehouse, office, above-ground storage tanks, trucks, everything I would like to see in 2 years that completely redeveloped into, you know, something more conforming with that side of town.
What do you plan to do with your existing warehouse there?
Either redevelop it, tear it down, don't really know yet. I want to get, I've mentioned it to the DDA to, you know, to get some ideas and possibly start trying to recruit people or do an RFP or something. But I don't know. I got to get moved first.
We're lobbying him for a bowling alley.
As it relates to down to earth or clean energy biofuels use on the property, the one thing that did come up that we've been discussing with Brad was as it relates to the NAICS code with rendering and meat byproduct processing. Our intention is to just put an exclusion in there that we would be excluding any animal carcasses, hides, bones, meat scraps, blood, or organs. We're not in the business of being an actual rendering facility, but rendering is a very broad term, and in the nature of what we do of collecting used cooking oil from restaurants and processing it, a lot of that falls under rendering as its true definition. Rendering is just to melt something, to take a fat and melt it into a liquid. And so we don't want to do away with that NAICS code as a use, but we are excluding, we're not going to be a slaughterhouse. We're not going to bring a slaughterhouse to Monroe and try to be that or be rendering, you know, direct animal byproducts from one. It's basically just used cooking oil and industrial kitchen byproducts. You know, our specialty is restaurant grease, basically, French fry oil. But that encompasses all. We've got restaurants that fry in duck fat, so we can't tell you when we're cooking used cooking oil that it doesn't have animal fats in it, and then is that definition considered rendering or not? So that was our intention, is just to include an exclusion that we will not be including those particular things that might be of some concern to the city.
And from staff's perspective, from what I understand in the conversations that Brad's had with them, rendering and meat byproduct processing is completely different than fats and oil refining and blending, which would cover the type of processing that they do from our perspective and from our interpretation. So you'd be subject to our interpretation anyhow in enforcing this new zoning ordinance. Therefore, rendering and meat byproduct processing, we would request that it be removed, and fats and oil and refining and blending be considered to do exactly what you just described.
So this is a condition.
Well, as a recommendation, you could make it a condition. I had expected that they were going to remove that code from the request of permitted proposed land uses.
The only thing I would say, I mean, if it stays in there, I think my last conversation with them this afternoon was, it would only include the grease rendering. Is that correct? I mean,
Yes.
if we leave that, if that land use stays in there, it could be left to say, only including grease rendering.
Yeah, our revision would be basically an exclusion of all hides, animal, you know, bones, all that from an actual slaughterhouse, and more geared toward kitchen byproducts, industrial kitchen, restaurant waste recycling. I mean, that is our specialty. We have 2,000 restaurant accounts across 7 states now, and we're consolidating the bulk of that material here, some also in Virginia and some in Alabama. But the restaurant industry and recycling cooking oil really is our bread and butter.
So only including a grease rendering would be a fair statement.
Well, I mean, if you look at the definition up there, if, unfortunately, we can't drill into the rendering aspect, but if you look at rendering, there's animal fats rendering, there's just in general protein rendering. But if you look up rendering in the dictionary, rendering is, as he was saying, is melting. So we can run across, for example, we deal with a lot of industrial facilities that have dash sludge, and it comes in as a solid. We're not dealing with organs, we're not dealing with blood or hides or any of that stuff. Rendering has that name because we all remember that poultry plant, and they rendered kind of where the Longhorns and Zaxby's is. That's not our intention at all. So by excluding all of those things from there, what we're trying to do is say that what we are doing is we're dealing with grease traps, and grease traps are typically about 95% water, 5% oil and solids, and that is with restaurants, but grease traps are industrial grease traps. You have commercial grease traps. There's all kinds of different grease traps. We also deal with, as he was saying, restaurants, and they use a myriad of fats. And so I'm trying to think of the one that used tallow that we're dealing with. We deal with
Popeyes uses tallow to fry in, just if you need a heart attack check next time you go through Popeyes. They're frying in tallow. It's very good, but it's also solid when you go try to collect it from the oil bin out behind the restaurant because it solidifies at 75 or 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
So one of the examples is we have all the military bases in the southeast, and they have Popeyes. We'll show up, the bin will be solid where they're dumping their oil. When we bring it back, if you take the definition of rendering, we actually have to add heat to it to render it down to a liquid. And that's what we're concerned about with the definition of rendering. And that's why we're trying to, instead of taking that NAICS code and saying, okay, we're just going to take this off the plate, we're going to say, with that NAICS code, we are going to say we are not going to do anything with the animal byproducts. And I think that's the main concern here.
I think what you can do, I mean, and I threw this on them kind of late today, so we were trying to go back and forth and discussing this specifically. I mean, I get the definition between what is rendering really, which is just heating a pre-used cooking oil that was already processed under one of these other land uses in some form or another. I mean, really, if the focus is the animal, what did you say, meat, bones, fat, and animal carcasses, under 311613, there's a couple other ones in there, so I would say at a minimum.
Rendering of vegetable oil.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that may not be applicable to this at all, so,
And all of those oils have already been rendered. Basically, what you're doing is refining and blending them into your product. That's my take on it. But
yeah, because I
again,
mean, rendering it really is the first time that fat, that solid is turned into a liquid. Is my understanding of what animal rendering is about. Is the first time that it's actually processed.
Yeah, so you're trying to differentiate between raw form rendering versus pre-rendered under the fats and oils refining, blending. I think what you guys intend to do is perfectly fine. We just want to make sure it's crafted in such a way that we don't end up with
raw source rendering.
raw source rendering, yeah.
Well said.
I've got two questions. One being, your plan out there on Jersey Road remains as is that right? What you're doing?
It will remain as is, but we will move all the semi-truck traffic to this current facility.
Right.
We've got several smaller things going on at Monroe Jersey Road, but the semi-truck traffic is the big key to get off of Monroe Jersey Road and get to Vine Street.
And I understand about the rendering processing, but you're doing like a recycling. Is that a cooking process that emits fumes and things like that? I'm not really familiar with it. What you can be doing with this?
It can, but not typically. I mean, I think if you asked any of our neighbors on Monroe, Jersey, they would never know that we were there. The typical way that odor is emitted from our process is if you're boiling the oil or getting it so hot that you're boiling water out of it. And in used cooking oil recycling, we don't get it that hot. So it's, we don't really generate an odor at our current facility, and any odor generated at this facility, we intend to be inside where we can capture it and scrub it where you'll never know it's there.
And just for the record, we bought a facility similar to the one we're going to put out on Vine Street back in 2018 in Cobb County. And we were bringing in all of the, basically exactly what we're talking about here. And that facility has been there how long?
It was there 15 or 20 years before we bought it. So it was probably built late 90s, early 2000s.
And we've actually had the city come and visit that facility in preparation for this to see what our process is. So it's not like something new that we're dealing with. We've been doing this for quite some time.
Thank you.
And once you finish processing all of those things, what becomes of the product?
Most of the product we're dealing with, we are trucking to New Orleans. So we also obviously operate a biodiesel production facility in Monroe, Jersey, for those of you that don't know, where we are still producing pretty small amounts of biodiesel in the world of fuel production. But the two or three largest producers of biodiesel and renewable fuels are located in and around New Orleans now. So we are trucking that feedstock to them. Valero is our largest customer. A subsidiary of Valero that's making a renewable diesel product. So they're taking animal fats, used cooking oil, any of that product, and turning it into a renewable diesel that is chemically identical to diesel fuel, but it's made from renewable sources.
So it's 87% less carbon because it's coming from a recycled product that's typically plant-based. You're going to always have animal fats in when you fry something. And it's 75% less emissions. So that's kind of where the United States is gravitating. Don't want to bore you, but the renewable fuel standard got started during the Bush era to create fuel instead of from the oil that you sequester from the ground from renewable products. And that's kind of where the world as a whole is gravitating to because they want to have less carbon emissions. And we're a main feedstock supplier to Valero, which is in New Orleans, but we also supply to Neste in Savannah. And this product is now getting blended into diesel fuel and is slowly becoming a way to reduce the carbon in the environment.
So this is similar to ethanol and gasoline.
Yeah, but ethanol, you're taking corn.
The difference is we're not competing with the food market. In the waste oils of used cooking oil, the big difference is we're not competing with the food industry for the feedstock. If we were strictly a soybean oil crusher, we might be. You know, if we were taking soybeans from 100,000 acres of farmland and crushing them for soybean oil, that's a little bit different story because you are competing with a food crop to some extent, or at least acreage for food crops.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would have to ask at this time if there was anybody present to speak in opposition to this request. Seeing none, then we will entertain a motion to approve with condition, or deny.
I move to approve.
With the condition
Conditions of
that one
rendering
item be
terminology.
out? I'll second it.
Just to be clear, Chairman, can we identify that exact terminology? Code officer, do you want to?
Yes, so the motion, as I understand it, is that move to approve with the exclusion of 311613 rendering and meat byproduct processing from the land uses within the PID.
That would be the motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? No opposition, so the motion does pass with the condition. Okay, at this time, item number 2, proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance number 13. Code officer, would you provide an explanation of that?
I will do my very best and also apologize for an oversight in my cover sheet. I thought this was only a modification of one item, but it's a modification of 2, so I'll modify that cover sheet before it gets to the council level based on your recommendation. This zoning text amendment covers the MHDO. It's section 644.2, to amend the language and the applicable requirements for the Monroe and Walton Mills Historic Overlay District to reduce the minimum parcel size for MHDO development from 1 acre to 4/10 of an acre. This is in an effort to allow it to be utilized as we envisioned it some years ago, but it's never been utilized. But there's a development need for infill development, and we believe that will encourage it. The second amendment is actually to remove the central business district from the corridor design overlay standards requirement, seeing as how they have their own, we have prescribed its own certificate of appropriateness process for the central business district, and it was redundant to have them go through 2 hearings on the same matter. So those are the 2 items in this text amendment. Of course, we wrote it, so we recommend approval as presented.
Any questions? Any questions?
Any particular reason you went for 4/10 of an acre instead of half an acre?
It really just allowed for, I think, up to 10 units per acre based on the lot size that would be prescribed by the ordinance. Brad, if you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, because the way the code is written right now, you're allowed up to 10 units per acre with a minimum acre size. So the way we looked at that was, it's actually written in the code now. It says all MHDO development shall contain a minimum of 4. And so really, if someone can come in and reasonably do in the same amount of space 4 or 5 units, 4 being the lowest, we felt that if you're dividing the parcel up into tenths and 1 acre is appropriate for 10, then certainly 4/10 would be appropriate for 4, 5 for 6, and so on. So the minimum would be to accommodate at least 4 units would be 4/10 of an acre, if that makes any sense. We're just we're trying to create flexibility for those that are not 1 acre in size within the district. Because in the MHDO, you're talking about very few parcels that are actually 1 acre in size. So it would require assemblage of properties, and most of that district even it comply with this requirement at all. So this isn't going to create a giant wave of MHDO developments but a few properties out there where there's assemblage possible or that are just under an acre in size that will work for them potentially.
Okay.
And I don't think there's been any MHDO activity, has there?
No, it's been 15, 16 years. I can't remember the exact date when we put this language into the zoning ordinance. It's never been utilized yet. So we're hoping that this will spur some interest in doing that by lowering that minimum acreage.
Can you go back to the other sheet that had the locations? Okay, Highway 11, Pearl Street. Just trying to get an idea of where one of these lots exists.
Okay, well, that portion is talking about the corridor design overlay district.
Right.
The other portion with the MHDO, that's in the mill housing districts, the one surrounding both of the old mills.
Okay, I got you.
Any more questions? This was advertised,
Yes.
so I would have to ask if there was anybody present to speak in opposition to this. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve or deny.
I move we approve.
Motion to approve
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. At this time, we will ask, let's see, if there's any old business to attend to? New business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Move in a second. All in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned.